Welcome back to the Ukraine cinematic universe, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Ukraine's greatest victory of the war, the Battle of Pokrovsk, or as I like to call it, Zelensky's five-star day. So, Pokrovsk represents the first territory that Russia has captured since 2022. After Russia's initial big offensives into Ukraine, it lost most of that territory during the 2022 counteroffensive, and then even more of it since 2023 with the big Ukrainian spring offensive. And since then, the war's just been in stalemate. There's been no movement, really. There was the embarrassing loss of some of their territory in Kursk, but otherwise the front line's basically just been in a stalemate. And this represents really the first first victory Russia's really had since 2022. Now, I just want to get something out of the way because I've been seeing some people, particularly of the pro-Russian persuasion, saying things, but this city has no strategic significance. There's no logistical, strategic, operational, or other value to it. I've been seeing these people who are paid by Russia say it's the gateway to the Dnieper, that it's one of the last fortress cities, that it's going to lead to a bunch of other places getting surrounded. But that isn't true. The thing is that this is only a propaganda victory. And we have these pro-Russian people who are making this stuff up and claiming that it's important to make Zelensky look bad and to make the collective West look bad. The reality is Russia failed to take this city during its initial offensive in 2022, and it failed to take it during their unprovoked invasion in 2014. And it's been an ongoing embarrassment for Putin. So it's been a high priority that regardless of the number of Russian soldiers he has to sacrifice, that Putin needs to take Pokrovsk, even though it has no strategic value. It's like there's a long list of these cities that they keep attacking that have no strategic value, but Putin needs to capture for the purposes of his ego, like Bakhmut, Mariupol, and Avdiivka. And I mean, I guess there's a certain logic to it. Russia is suffering an extremely high desertion rate at the moment. Morale is extremely low. I've heard people estimate that somebody close to the conflict told me that something like 30,000 Russian soldiers deserted over the course of Pokrovsk. And just the tide of history is turning against Putin. Trump came out with that True Social post and said Ukraine is winning, that Russia's finished. He's going to start testing nuclear weapons again. It's going to bankrupt Russia even more. He had that call with Modi, and Modi agreed to stop buying Russian oil. We have the 19th sanction package coming in. Trump put the tariff smackdown on China. China's going to buy less Russian oil. The situation is looking really, really bad. And this is just making morale even worse. And as more and more Russian soldiers desert, Putin needs a victory. So he's been gassing up Pokrovsk as being this important city that if they're able to capture it, it will turn the war around. Because like I said, they've had zero victories since 2022. So let's just talk a bit about the macro situation. So like I said, we had the 19th sanction package, Trump's tariffs on China, and India and a bunch of European and neutral countries all agreed to stop buying Russian oil. And this has devastated Russia's military-industrial complex. The only real source of revenue that the Russian government receives is from oil and gas. There's not really an economy beyond energy within Russia. It's a gas station pretending to be a country. So when all these countries agreed to stop buying oil, the Russian economy is just kind of coasting along on whatever money it got from previous oil sales. And when that runs out, Russia's already massive deficit and debt is going to keep increasing. Russia has totally mobilized its entire economy. It's implemented strict rationing throughout the country. And they were already just kind of operating on the knife's edge of being unable to fulfill any consumer goods. So, with the failing oil sales, the 19th sanction package, and China and India abandoning them, it's a ticking time bomb. And the Russian people know it. And so, with military production continuing to fall, Putin felt that he needed a win in order to save the situation. So, opening phase of the battle. So, this battle has proved to be a total disaster for Russia. Now, in the early phases of the war, according to people who have heard of the situation, Russia lost up to 50 tanks in the opening month of the battle due to Ukrainian drones. It's clear they haven't learned their lesson, and they keep sending tanks out across open fields to attack things, and drones just keep hitting them, and they've made no attempt to camouflage them or do anything to deal with it. So they lost a whole bunch of tanks. For the first 5 months of the battle, Russia tried to rely on artillery fire, but this was ineffective because Russian artillery is extremely inaccurate, and the operators are very poorly trained, as they're just like conscripts taken from rural Murmansk or something, or Kamchatka. Just some random farmers from Kamchatka who that were kidnapped and taken there. So they don't know how to operate an artillery cannon, and they don't really train their troops. And even if they did train them, their morale would be bad. So they basically have just been firing shells ineffectively for the last 5 months. Ukrainian soldiers have just been kind of hiding in their dugouts. And Russia's burned through all of their ammunition reserves. They've had to pull it from other fronts. And it's just been proven a mess. And they got all the shells from North Korea. But the problem with the North Korean shells is they were so poorly made. A bunch of them exploded in the cannons and took the cannons out. And that made the whole situation just a lot worse. Likewise, they tended to use these glide bombs and missiles, but they're once again very poor quality. The people who are using them are not trained, they're not professional soldiers, and bad accuracy. So, according to people who have heard of the situation, they told me that probably about as many, if not more, Russian soldiers died because the Russians would be just indiscriminately firing glide bombs and missiles, and it was hitting as many of their own people. So what had happened was by March of this year, due to the 16th sanction package, Russia had completely run out of ammunition for their artillery, and they were almost out of missiles, so they were forced into frontal assaults with small arms. So, like I said, there was no heavy weapons. All the armored vehicles got destroyed by drones. So Russia switched to full frontal meat wave assaults. So, like, you can see the videos. The videos on the websites that post the videos, you would just see hundreds of Russian soldiers leaving their trenches and just charging at Ukrainian machine guns, allowing themselves to get shot to pieces. And that's what happens when you have an army that has no formal training. And like the Russian war economy has been able to provide assault rifles to most of them, but a lot of them have had to make do with pistols, or they've dusted off old World War II Mosin Nagants. And so like after months of this, desertion just kind of kept worse and worse. According to people who I talked to about this situation, up to 30% of the attacking Russian forces may have abandoned their posts over the course of this battle. Once again, according to an analyst of Russian media, the situation has been getting worse and worse. So Putin passed a decree that the punishment for drinking and driving and a host of other offenses would henceforth be 6 months of service on the front line. So they've been arresting people for a lot of things, from drunk driving to bar fights to petty theft like shoplifting. If any of these people get caught, the Russian army is so short on volunteers and so short on manpower, they've just been sending these people to the front line. Russia is a very corrupt country. You're having wide-scale fabrication of petty crimes of civilians so they can be kidnapped and forced into it. So Russian soldiers are generally speaking thrown into battle with a couple of weeks of training. However, they were just throwing so many people in that by midsummer 2025, it looked like the battle was entering its final phase. So, like I said, using the recently mobilized hordes of conscripts, Russia was able to partially surround Pokrovsk. However, like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, the Azov Brigade and a bunch of other elite mechanized units gained complete tactical surprise. They drove off the shattered Russians at immense costs. The Ukrainians then said, look, this city has no strategic importance. We're just going to withdraw from it and leave them this wreckage. They played this trick on the Russians, though. They had a couple special forces groups, squads in the city who would periodically shoot at the Russians, and the Russians thought that like the Ukrainians still had a large garrison there. So they spent like an extended period of time just firing missiles and rockets and artillery shells at empty buildings that they thought were being held by Ukrainian soldiers. And meanwhile, they've also been taking massive casualties from all the traps that the Ukrainian army has left behind. Like I said, these are poor farmers for Kamchatka. No, none of them know how to like screen for traps or anything like that. So what is the aftermath of this? Russia exhausted its artillery and missile stores at the Battle of Pokrovsk. According to a person who had heard about the war, Russia only has a couple of weeks of missiles and shells left. In like 2 or 3 weeks, they're going to completely run out. So maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, Russia will just be completely out and other stuff is going to have to stop. Furthermore, Russia is doing a whole new round of mobilization to replace their losses. So according to people who watched a news report about this story, Ukraine approximately took about 6,000 casualties, of which 90% made a full recovery. Russia lost something like 80,000, most of whom died or were injured enough to not take any part in the full-scale invasion, largely due to just bad medical care and the ignorance of the medical officers that the Russians had. Russia has had to halt on all fronts. There's no more advances happening, and desertions have just surged. So, according to open source intelligence, it is unlikely Russia will make any more moves this year, and the Ukrainian army is preparing for a spring of counteroffensive towards the Sea of Azov that will cause widespread panic. The southern front, the southern Russian army is just going to run away. They're going to reach Crimea. The regime's going to collapse in Russia, and there's going to be widespread victory from the 2026 Ukrainian counteroffensive. So, like I said, it's probably the biggest victory Ukraine has had so far this war, even bigger in some ways than the Kharkov counteroffensive or the 2023 spring offensive or even the ghost of Kiev. As Putin has been completely humiliated, he's burned through pretty much all the remaining stores. Russia's about 2 weeks away from running out of artillery shells and missiles. And like I said, in the words of Ethan Ralph, the whole battle can best be described as a 5-star day for Zelensky and for Ukraine as a whole. So thank you, everybody. That was Ukraine's cinematic universe for today. God bless, and more Ukrainian victories to come.